Welcome to Career Tools. This week, speak the language, get names right. This cast answers, how do I get names right in foreign languages? How can I use names to help me learn languages? And can I learn someone's name in front of them?
Finally, after years of waiting, The Effective Manager in book form is available at Amazon and Barnes & Noble and your other retail booksellers, as well as signed copies are available on our website, manager-tools.com. If you want to know the basics of how to manage others effectively in book format, including Kindle and ebook format as well, we encourage you to buy, read, and then implement the guidance in The Effective Manager.
Danny, you and I have done a couple of these language casts.
Yes.
And this is going to be the last one for a while, but we have been talking about names, and names in other languages can be tricky. They don't look the same, they don't sound the same, and I have to say some names just look like a random collection of letters that couldn't possibly go together. So we're going to give some people some advice or some guidance on trying to make names work when you're speaking a foreign language or you're overseas or just people with unfamiliar names to you.
Yeah, there's a lot of unfamiliar names to me here in the States. So yeah. I don't think it's necessarily only when you're traveling internationally, but I think it probably, for the reasons we've talked about in the previous cast, Wendy, it's probably we're more aware of it when we're traveling out of our home country because there's so much other things that are new. Names are very important, right? We know that someone's name is the sweetest sound to their own ears. So very important.
So the guidance is respect names, ask them to repeat their name, and use names as clues. So do you want to start us off?
Sure. So first, respect names. Like I just said, they're very, very important. Dale Carnegie told us that in, I think, probably one of the very first chapters in How to Win Friends and Influence People is to use people's names. So sometimes, often, the name that somebody chooses to go by is not the same as their given name. And the name that a person chooses is them sending a message to the world about who they are inside. It's an outward demonstration of who they are or how they view themselves. So it's probably not something that they just casually picked, and it's really important to pay attention to the name that somebody gives you that they want to be called because they've picked that name or their family has picked that name, but it's not something that's just random. And more people are going by names that were not their legally given names. When I think back over people that I've met and people that I still meet, easily 30-35% of people, and if you look at HR records, you probably see that too, are not going by their given names, are not going by their legal names. I'm a great example of that. Danny is actually a derivative of my middle name, which is Daniela. My first name is completely different, and I'm not going to say it here because I so don't
because
like it.
Because if you wanted to be called it, I would be called it, right?
Yes. It drives me crazy because people are always like, what's your first name? And I'm like, I'm not going to tell you. Oh, tell me. If I liked it, I would go by it. Please don't make me tell you something I don't like. And it's really quite irritating when people don't call you by your correct name because my legal name is on all of my documentation. And so I often get called my given legal name, which is not the name I go by. And not only is it irritating, you don't know that people are even talking to you.
Does it feel like it's not you?
Oh, absolutely.
Like I always feel like I'm looking around for someone who is that person, but that you just called by that name because it's not me.
Yes.
Because I also don't go by my legal name.
Yes. And I remember the first day of school every year while I was growing up through elementary school and high school, and every class when I got into high school and you were going to different teachers, on the first day every year, they would do roll call and they would call out my first name and I'd be like, that's me. I go by Danny. And the looks that I would get, because it's my middle name. It's not even my middle name. My middle name is Daniela. And Danny, it just made no logical sense. They couldn't figure out how I got Danny out of this name they were looking at on the piece of paper. And I would often spend the first 2 or 3 weeks correcting my teachers about what I wanted to be called. And getting someone's name right at the beginning of that relationship is a huge plus, because I can tell you, I can still remember teachers who I was having to correct weeks later, and I don't remember them fondly. And so it shows a respect or a lack of respect if you don't learn somebody's name from the beginning. It shows you that you care about them when you take the time to learn their name and use it.
Exactly. And you care about the things that are important to them. And names are super important to people.
Absolutely.
So when you first meet someone, it is okay to ask them to repeat their name several times. When they first give their name, especially if it's something unfamiliar to you, your brain doesn't always work quickly enough to hear what's being said, because it has an expectation of what's going to be said. It's kind of set up on that channel. And when you hear something completely unfamiliar, it doesn't really take anything in. And so if you ask them to say it again, your brain is like, okay, I know something weird happened. Now I'm going to pay attention. It's a common thing that your brain's not quite engaged, and it happens in all sorts of situations. It's not a sign that you're going mad or that you can't comprehend what people are saying. It happens that your brain switches off. There's so many inputs into your brain that it has this kind of selective thing that it doesn't always hear everything, it doesn't always see everything, it doesn't always take every input. So don't worry about it if you didn't hear them first time or you just feel like you completely spaced. Just ask them to say it again.
And it happens to everybody.
Oh, absolutely.
This is true about everybody. So it's not just you.
Yeah. So when you listen to it the second time or the third time, try and listen to the syllables and turn them into sounds that you're familiar with. So for example, I was talking to my Taiwanese friend the other day, and it was her birthday, and so I asked her to say happy birthday in Taiwanese. And to me, it sounds like joggy, like jogger, and then sandy, like sandy on the beach, and then queenon, which sounds like a Latin kind of thing. So joggy, sandy, queenon. Please don't correct me. I hope that I'm somewhere close. But by translating it into pieces I could think of something else and relate it to, I was able to remember it and say the sounds somewhat close. She gave me a gold star anyway.
And I think it's often easier for me, and I don't think I'm alone in this, if I can see the name written down first.
Mm-hmm.
This is one of my favorite reasons for why we do introductions at the beginning of our Effective Manager and Effective Communications conferences, because we have an international audience. And so we get people with names, all kinds of names that are not familiar to me. And again, even folks who are, born and raised in America, like me, Danny, have unusual names. And being able to see somebody's name on the flip chart when they're doing their introduction and hear them say it at the same time is super, super helpful.
And many languages other than English, which is just difficult, in many other languages, what is written are the actual sounds that are said. So our friend Ananda, who has an incredibly long name, if you see it written down, it's just the syllables an, da. And you can say it easily if you've seen it written down. Probably 50%, 60% of languages are built that way, so that what you see written is exactly what you say.
I didn't think about this until just now, Wendy, hearing you say that. I think sometimes for me, because like you said, English is so weird, I will have a conversation in my head and I will tell myself, oh, it's pronounced exactly like it's spelled. Like often I see a name that's unfamiliar and I will think it can't possibly be as simple as just exactly what it looks like. It has to be something different. And I'll try, it's almost like I try and make it harder than it is. So I think I'm definitely going to keep that in mind, because I find myself doing that all the time, trying to make it harder. And people often say to me, no, it's pronounced exactly like it's spelled.
Yeah, it's interesting.
This is also, I think, where for me it's helpful for what we do, that I can get a written list of people that I'm going to be meeting ahead of time. So if you can, we definitely recommend that you do that too, because we have a roster of all the people who are registered for our conferences, and we will study that roster and pay attention to the names so that as we're introducing ourselves to people when they're coming in, we're not kind of thinking about their name for the first time. We're already familiar with the names on the list, and now we're just putting a name with a face or a pronunciation with the name that we saw in writing. And again, that's where it can be helpful to remember it's pronounced exactly the way it's spelled, because I've been looking at that roster for 2 months beforehand.
Yeah, you've seen that name, and the name itself means something to you because you have that image of the letters in your head already.
Right.
Nobody ever seems to think of this trick, but there are a lot of websites where you can put a name in and there's a pronunciation thing that is just a clip of someone saying that name or that word, so you can listen to it before you even meet someone. And the other thing that some people struggle with is whether names are male or female. If you do an image search on Google on a name, you come up with a bunch of people, and there's usually a preponderance of male or female.
Oh, that's
So
a
that
great
probably
idea.
tells you who you're going to meet and what to expect. It's not foolproof, but it's better than nothing.
Absolutely. One thing that a lot of people hesitate to do is just ask the person as you're repeating their name back to them to verify that you said it correctly. And I think a lot of us are, afraid to do. It's kind of the same reason why we're afraid to admit we don't know somebody's name or we don't remember somebody's name. We don't want to look stupid. But people know, again, speaking from somebody who has an unusual name for a woman, I'm very used to people saying my name back or correcting them, because I often get Dana or Annie or Sandy or Dina. Like, I get all kinds of other things other than Danny. And so it doesn't bother me at all if somebody would say, repeat it back to me, and then say, did I get that right? I would rather them ask and me correct them than them call me Dana for 3 years, which I've also had happen to me.
That's just unbearable. You're right. Many people who have difficult names, or people that know that the person they're meeting, that the name isn't going to be familiar to them, are more than willing to say it more than once. My name can be difficult for some people, especially if they only hear my name, because they have to hear my name and translate the accent at the same time, and it's quite a short name, so they don't get a lot of time to kind of switch gears. And so I always say, if they don't get it, I say Wendy, like Peter Pan, because that's where Wendy came from. But most people who have difficult to pronounce names will have some kind of trick to help you remember their name or help you pronounce it. I know someone who's called Nichelle, which is Michelle with an N at the front. I don't know why her mother decided not to have an M, but to have an N. But so she's Nichelle. And when you meet her, she says, hi, I'm Nichelle. It's like Michelle with an N.
Absolutely.
She just preempts the fact that her name isn't usual. And so nearly everyone I know who has a name that's difficult to pronounce has one of those kind of things to help people do it. And they're all willing to say it again. Just think of yourself. If somebody was struggling with your name, wouldn't you want to help them?
Of course
you would. So that everybody else is doing that too. I don't know why we are embarrassed to ask other people when we would be not embarrassed to help.
This is such a great idea. I learned this from you. It only took me 40 some odd years. And I started about a year or 2 years ago. When I introduced myself, I started saying, Danny, it's short for Danielle. And then people are like, oh, because otherwise I get Annie or Dina or Dana, right? Whereas Danny, they can definitely see or hear the connection between Danny and Danielle. And it's drastically reduced the number of people who mispronounce my name. So if you have an unusual name, like I do, or you have, a situation with like Wendy, where you notice that people are getting your name wrong a lot, I would really encourage you to think of something like that, because it makes a big difference.
And it's fine to take some time to get someone's name right. It's way better to take some time, take 10 minutes when you first know them, and to, when you meet them the first couple of times, 2 or 3 times after the first meeting, to say, okay, I think you said your name was like this. Did I get that right? Until you're getting it right consistently. It's fine to do that in the beginning of a relationship. It's just weird to do it 3 months later or 3 years
Or
later.
3 years later.
In the beginning, this is when you have the chance to get it right and to not be embarrassed. And it's just the right time. So take as much as you need from this time.
I just moved into a new house, and I was just meeting one of our new neighbors this week, and we introduced ourselves, and I said, I'm Danny. It's short for Danielle. And she said, oh, Danny. And I said, no, Danny, short for Danielle. And she said, oh, Danny, nice to meet you. And I said, no, Danny, like the boy's name, Danny. And she said, oh, okay, Danny. After the third time I just kind of smiled. And I just thought to myself, that is what I'm going to be as long as we live here. That is what she's going to call me.
And sometimes it's a pronunciation thing, right? Because there's the whole, how do you say the word pen? And some people say as pin.
Yes.
And especially with short vowels. So it may be just that's how she says any word that has an A in it.
It could be a Southern accent thing. Absolutely. Our next recommendation is to use people's names as clues. Names give you clues about word structure and pronunciation. So if you're traveling outside of your home country in a country that speaks a different language, the names can give you insight into the language. In many languages, words are long, but they're almost always pronounced as they're written, except for probably in English, right?
Yes.
In English, we have so many words that are spelled almost exactly the same, but pronounced completely differently.
Or words that have 18 letters and we only pronounce 3 of them.
Right, right. Cough, rough, dough, through, all are spelled almost the same, right? They all end in O-U-G-H, but pronounced completely different. I can't imagine learning English as a second language. It makes no sense whatsoever.
The Romance languages like French and Italian I find more difficult because they have the same letters, but they're pronounced differently depending on where they are in words. But if you've learned a few people's names and then you see the same construction in a word, it helps you guess how that word would be pronounced.
Which it can be very helpful when you're, again, in situations where you're not with other people speaking the same language as you.
Mm-hmm. And then Mandarin, the same word with a different tone, can mean something else. My Taiwanese friend's name is Little Rosebush. And when she pronounces it and she says, okay, this is the part that sounds like little, and this is the part that means rosebush, I get an idea of how I would pronounce those words if I used them in different sentences and not as part of a name.
That's a great name, Little Rosebush.
Yeah. Her English name is Joy, and she just is. She lives up to that. Yeah. And the other thing about names is they're often, like my friend, based on characteristics, and they help you learn nouns and adjectives. So some people are named after professions, like Smith, which comes from blacksmith or silversmith, and Cooper, which is a man who or a woman, I guess, who makes barrels for wine.
Or Miller.
Yeah, exactly. Some people are named after colours, like Mr. Green and Mr. Brown and Miss White. Some people are named after physical characteristics, like long or young. And other people are named after landmarks, like hill or moor, which is a kind of, I don't know, do you have moors here?
Not really.
like in Heathcliff. I'm more like in Heathcliff. And so the other thing you can do is look up names in name meaning lists. And that often helps you learn even more vocabulary because you can think of that person and then you remember their name and you remember that their name means this, and that helps you when you're struggling for a word in other places.
When you start to think about it, there are so many names that are also proper nouns or adjectives. Absolutely.
Yeah, because that's where they came from.
Right, right.
And names also have cultural clues. So people with the surname Singh are often Sikh. They change their name to Singh when they pass a certain religious ritual. In your own language, you can probably tell how old people are by their first name, because names go in and out of fashion.
Right?
And you can tell that in other languages too. It's not unique to whatever language you speak.
And here in the States, somebody named Jennifer is probably almost always going to be a woman in her like late 30s to 40s. Because when I was in school, we had like 12 Jennifers in my graduating class.
The girls weren't as bad when I was at school, but we definitely had 5 Stevens and 4 Daniels in a class of 30.
Yeah.
So, yeah, you can definitely tell. And some names tell you where in a country people are from or what area they're from. We need to be careful about creating stereotypes based on people's names. Like, if you look at someone's name and then immediately conjure something up, that can be helpful. We don't want to make assumptions about people. We want to meet people on their own terms and as they are. But we can use them to begin to link things, words and ideas and people, and to help us understand people and understand the language.
And I think that helps you remember the name.
It does.
Also, when you can link it with other things. I was thinking about when I grew up in central Pennsylvania, where there's a large Pennsylvania Dutch, Mennonite, Amish community, and everybody was either a Stoltzfus or a Yoder. Those are just it's kind of like Smith and Jones. And I live in the South, and there's no Stoltzfus or Yoder. And the first time we went to Pennsylvania and my husband met somebody named Stoltz, he was like, what? Like, he had the hardest time with that last name. Whereas I grew up with it, so it was like very easy for me. But it is, I mean, it's when you see it written, it's not the easiest, where there's lots of consonants in it. But it does help you, I think, to make those types of connections, and then you can remember people's names, or you can remember, where they're from, which is, again, helps with that relationship building, if the more you can remember about them.
Absolutely. And the last thing that people tell you when they signal to you when they tell you their names, is what kind of disc profile they have. So someone who tells you what you may or may not call them, they're going to be a high D. So you can call me Wendy. You cannot call me Wend. And if you do, I will tell you, please don't call me that. I don't like it. So my 2 brothers and my 2 best friends get to call me Wend. Nobody else does. And I will correct you because I'm a high D. Someone who tells you their nickname is probably a high I, because high I's love nicknames.
And high I's will give you nicknames.
Yes.
They'll even give you nicknames that you've told them not to give you.
Exactly. Yes, comically, both my brothers are high I's.
Yeah.
And so that's why they either call me Wend or they call me by one of several nicknames. Because, why call me by my actual name?
Oh, a nickname is so much better. I often say during our effective communications conference that there's only 2 people in my entire life, kind of like your brothers and Wen. There's only 2 people in my entire life who call me Dan, or who are allowed to call me Dan, and they are both high I's. And one is Maggie on our team, and the other is my very best friend since we were 12, Gina, and she calls me Dan. And they're the only 2 people in my life who have ever called me Dan, or who would be allowed to, because I hate it. Like, Danny is already fairly masculine. We don't need to make it any more masculine. But it's just, both high I's. And Maggie will send me emails all the time. Hey, Dan. I've never, ever referred to myself as Dan or signed an email Dan or anything, but Maggie's allowed to.
Maggie gives everybody nicknames.
Yes.
Someone who doesn't correct you, even after you've butchered their name for months, is probably high S. I was doing some hiring for an assistant for Mark. I was doing some pre-screening, and I interviewed somebody twice. And twice, obviously, I said her name. She repeated it back to me. I said, have I got it right? And she said yes. And she had the interview, so I'd interviewed her twice, and she went to an interview with Mark, and the first thing after the interview, Mark calls me and says, you know her name's something else, like completely different to the way I had been pronouncing it. And I was like, huh? I asked her. That's what she told me her name was. She was IS.
And she wanted a job.
Yeah, she didn't like to correct me. Yeah. High Seas use their full name. Even if it could be abbreviated, they tend to use the complete name. And there are often people who will put their initial in the middle of their name, too.
Yes. My stepdaughter just had a baby, and her name is Emerson. And her husband is a High C. And so my husband, who is a High I, said, oh, I'm going to call her Emmy. And Emerson's High C father quickly said, no, it's Emerson.
My brother is the same. He had a boy called Isaac, who my dad has the High I nickname thing, although he's actually a DC. But he instantly called the baby Izzy, to which its High C mother said, his name is Isaac.
Yes.
Yeah. So you can tell what people tell you a lot when they're telling you their name, even if it's way more than just their name.
Absolutely. So in summary, Wendy, names are important, and getting people's names right shows that you care about them. And thinking more about people's names and what their names mean can really help you assimilate into a new country and learn bits of the new language.
Yeah. So go forth and introduce yourself to people. And we'll be back soon.
Awesome. Thanks, Wendy.
Thanks. Bye, everyone. That's all this week. We'll be back next week with more guidance about your career.
If you enjoyed this podcast and you want the how-tos of management wherever you are, check out the free Manager Tools mobile app. It's available on both iOS and Android devices. Go to the Apple Store or the Google Play Store and download the Manager Tools app. Just search for Manager Tools in the respective store, or go to the Manager Tools website, www.manager-tools.com, and you'll find the links on the bottom of the homepage. Once you've installed the Manager Tools app, you'll have access to all the Manager Tools and Career Tools shows anytime, anywhere you want. With easy searching of podcasts by category, using the map of the universe, or using built-in search functions, it couldn't be easier. Additionally, if you're Manager Tools personal licensee, you'll have easy access to all the show notes right from the app whenever you want. Go to the App Store and download the Manager Tools mobile app. You'll be happy you did.